Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Purpose, Passion, and Profession podcast. Today, I am really lucky. I've got an old friend of mine as a guest, Dan Cotter. Dan is an attorney here in Illinois, and he and I have known each other for, I'd say, the 90s. We've known each other since the 90s. I was very active in the Chicago Bar Association back then. He has been throughout his career, an active member of the CBA. We're going to touch on that later in the episode. He is a business lawyer in the most generic sense of the word, but we're going to dig into what specifically, his work entails. He is a graduate of Monmouth College and a undergrad and a graduate of the John Marshall Law School, which is now the UIC Law School. And he and I have been practicing law for about the same amount of time. I think I've been out since 1994. He's been out right about the same time. So, while we've been in this industry, for the same amount of time, we've done some very different things, and it's going to be really fun to dig into that. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing well today. Thanks for having me, and great to see
Yeah,
you.
it's my pleasure. It's great to have you here. So let's just start off with where you started off your education, post high school. Tell us about where you went and what you did there.
Sure. Yeah, I chose Monmouth College. I had gone to a high school in Chicago that was very competitive in football. Never started it down in 4 years there on the main team, but decided I wanted to still play football. I think a lot of people, including my dad and everybody else, thought, what the hell is wrong with you? But I chose Monmouth. They had a new coach and a new program going on, and got down to that small little campus. And about a weekend, I was not in good shape. I'd worked hard all summer, but not in the gym. And my roommate at the time said, give it a little bit of time, and the rest is history. But Monmouth, for those that don't know about it, at its peak probably was about 1,200, 1,300 students. Now it struggles to be in the 700 range. When I was there, we thought it was bigger, but it was about 500 residential uh, folks. Very small little school.
That's out near Macomb.
It's just north of Macomb, correct?
Yeah, I know you and I, you've told me for years about Monmouth College and the benefits of small schools. And I didn't really understand where it was until I finally made a trip out to Western to do a speaking, guest lecturing. And as I'm driving towards the campus, I'm like, that's Dan's university.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's in the middle of cornfields and small town of about 10,000 people. That's stayed the same too since 84 when I first got there. It was about 10,000. I think it's still about 10,000. They don't gain or lose anybody. They just stay at 10,000 people. So very
Yeah,
little
there's nothing
school.
wrong with that, actually.
No, no.
So you went to Monmouth and you wanted to play football there. And I think that this is something I want to dig into really quickly. You said you didn't start it down on the first team in high school. What were you thinking about going to play at the next level then?
It's the only thing I can tell you is at the end of my junior year, in the spring of my junior year, we had an offensive line coach. He ended up going to Naperville to coach and had a very successful career there. John Urban is his name. We had like these one-on-ones with him at lunchtime, and he told me, he said, Dan, football's not fun for you yet, but if it ever becomes fun for you, you'll be great at it. And that stuck with me. My senior year, I went to Gordon Tech, and Gordon Tech gave out scholarships, and I was not a scholarship person because, again, I only played 1 year of grade school ball. So I never, and they brought a sophomore up my senior year. We went head to head as centers, 10 or 15 reps at the end of August. I beat him 14 times. On the 15th, we came to a standstill, and they said he's starting. And good guy, great football player. The ironic thing though is the next year he didn't play center at all. He moved to, I don't know what position he moved to, but in any event, I thought that there was still the ability to play. I'd written down a bunch of stuff about wanting to play football, and you know, uh, it was one of those things. Again, I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm glad I did because football, as we'll get into, is really what was the basis for me, you know, pretty much going to law school and everything else in life, and finding time management balance and finding lifelong friends and all the other stuff.
You said something about, you had written something down about football. Were you the, one of those, young people that journaled and, set goals?
I really didn't journal a lot, I would once say, but I put down, again, through high school, junior year, and senior year, kind of goals I wanted to do. I wanted to start. I wanted to be all conference. I wanted to be, whatever it was. I wanted to, in the weight room, achieve certain things. And so I always looked at that kind of journaling, just pushed myself to make sure that I was doing it. I wanted to run a sub 5 second 40 and all those things. And, would look at those and keep notes of progress I was making.
Yeah, yeah, you measure what you treasure, right? So,
Right.
you gotta write it down.
You do, as you know, and we'll get into as well with the lifting and stuff. Even today, if you don't keep track of it, I've taught my youngest son who lifts regularly. If you're going to lift, you got to keep track of it because it's a one man contest, right? You're competing against yourself and bettering yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So you set these pretty high goals for yourself, for high school. So, with like the all conference and starting, you already told me that you didn't start. What about the all conference?
In high school,
Hmm.
none of it happened. To get my letter my senior year of high school, we made the state playoffs. We were actually favored to win, and we lost to Morton East. And I was on a kickoff return, the one kickoff, because we didn't score. We only scored one touchdown, I think so, or the other team only scored one touchdown as well. And so I was on a kickoff return, and that was my one starting down in 4 years of high school. So that was it.
So you set a bunch of pretty lofty goals for yourself. You didn't achieve them, and yet you still, you know, put yourself out there to play football at the next level. And I just kind of want to dig into, if you can think back to that time, like what were you thinking, about yourself and your abilities, given that, all right, you didn't even start in high school, and yet you believed in yourself that you could go and play at the next level. Can you share with me? Because that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was I saw myself as having spent 5 years of my falls of each of those years practicing. I knew I was good enough. Again, a lot of the comments at the senior awards banquet and stuff in high school, the comments that were made that I was good enough to start. I just had that belief that I was very, by the way, I don't think, I could not have done like a podcast like this or anything. I was a very shy, kind of introverted, quiet person in high school. But yeah, I had this belief, and so I was looking for small football programs. I got a lot of letters, because again, Gordon Tech was a powerhouse. Now DePaul Prep, they were a powerhouse, and so I was getting letters from Lake Forest and Illinois Benedictine and Knox and some bigger schools as well, but mostly Division III. And my dad and I, his role, he was a Chicago police officer, so his thing was we could go look at any schools, but it had to be on his day off, and it had to be within a 3-hour drive, so we can get down there and come back on his day off, have a bite to eat. And
Yeah,
so like I said, I went to Monmouth. We went the Wednesday before Thanksgiving of my senior year. There was a coach there that we went in the locker room, and that they had finished playing weeks ago, and it was still dripping water in the showers. There was still tape on the floor. It was kind of gross still in the locker room, and I walked away saying I don't think that's the place for me. And then a few weeks later, that coach got fired, and they brought on a new coach. I saw that in the USA Today when I was looking in one day in the library at the high school. And so, I went down there for an academic awards type of day, interviews and whatever. I don't even remember what we had to do for that. And I liked the coach. My dad liked the coach, and so that was it. And again, it's looking back, I still don't know what I was thinking. And you know, if probably 99 times out of 100, I probably would have just said the heck with it. I also had tragic in my family. My older sister when I was May of my senior year of high school. She passed away from leukemia, and so that was weighing on me as well. When I went to Monmouth, I was down there for doubles. I knew that my younger siblings were hurting, my family was hurting, and again, I was just like, I'm gonna just quit. I'm gonna go home and figure out what I'm gonna do. And again, the coach and that roommate of mine just convinced me to stay. And again, I'm glad I did. But it was a, it was a, and I was not good at all those my first year, my freshman sophomore year at Monmouth. I did well in the conference and was honorable mention all conference my freshman year, but I just wasn't very good. I mean, it just showed you that the conference was not very good, but we got better.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know about your sister passing away,
Yeah, thank
at a
you.
young age. Um, that's very, very challenging, uh, when a sibling passes away, at a young age, so, my condolences to you on that.
Thank you.
So, when you were at Monmouth, you didn't just play football. You were another athlete, you were a two-sport athlete. What was the other one?
I was a track athlete, although the story on that is that the head football coach was also the throws track coach, and so it was almost Division 3. You can't play spring football, and so it was really more of a method for me to stay in shape and to go through various drills. And one of my best friends still from undergrad, he became an All-American shot putter, five-time All-American shot putter at Monmouth. He also played offensive guard and was an All-American guard as well his senior year. But he really got aggravated because he'd go to practice, he wanted to throw, he wanted to film his kind of his glide, and all that stuff. He wanted to do things that would better his speed across the ring. We're swimming in the swimming pool, for stamina. We're running 3 miles. We're doing all kinds of, hurdle jumps and other crap. He's like, this is not, making me a better shot putter.
Yeah, it sounds like it was more geared towards preparing you for, like, August.
It was, and I mean, I was a decent shot putter, but again, before my freshman year of college, I never threw a shot put. And in high school, it's 16 pounds. It's 12 pounds in high school, I guess. And I just couldn't get the glide really down. I mean, one of the things that my football coaches and almost any sport I've ever played will tell you is that my form and like just I'm like an idiot when it comes to like, you know, with the Chicago Bar, I've gone golfing and Randy Huntley, the old catcher from the Cubs, he was trying to show me to putt one day. He got so frustrated. He went to another foursome. He's like, "You're such a lunkhead, you idiot." He said, "Just do this. Stop it." But that's how the shot put was, and I was okay at it. One other funny story that just comes to mind is my freshman year. I had these shoes that were worn down, and there was a bunch of decathlon elites and other people running the hundreds at an open over at Knox or Arch Rival, and I entered it, and I got in a 3-point stance. I had no blocks or anything, and I finished like fifth out of 10 or whatever the number of people is, and ran a pretty fast 100, and some of those athletes were like, "What the hell is this guy doing? 225, 30 pounds, lunkhead with gym shorts on and old gym shoes."
I was gonna say, were you, like, the biggest, of the competitors on the line?
No, it's interesting because there were two cousins. The tackles were 6'3" each and about 280, 300 pounds. And
Oh, wow.
my freshman year at Monmouth, I was probably 6'2", 225. I grew an inch my freshman year, and then I finished my senior year 6'3", about 250. And that guard that I told you about, the shot putter, was bigger. But we had some smaller people as well, and we have a guy that went to Weber High School in Chicago, which is a Gordon Tech arch rival, 2 years behind me. He was 5'10" and about 300 pounds. So there were some big boys playing the line, and for Division 3, we were a pretty good size offensive line.
So, you played football, you were a shot putter on the track team, but you did really well, and, you w w in at Monmouth College, you had a lot of success academically. Talk about that.
Sure, yeah. But I during high school, One of the classes that I took was from a baseball coach at Gordon Tech. It was accounting, introduction to accounting. And believe it or not, in that class of 25, there's probably 15 of those people that went on to study accounting in undergraduate from just that one class of mine, a lot of my teammates and classmates. And so I was one of those maybe rare students, but I think, you and I are about the same age. I think it was a different back when we were younger. I think now the kids have trouble finding their majors, but I went into Monmouth knowing I wanted to major in accounting, that they had a very small accounting department. And it was something that struck. I did pretty well in high school, but I did better in college. I really enjoyed accounting classes. I enjoyed the liberal arts, all the other stuff that I had to take, psychology, and the only bad grade I got was my freshman year, my first quarter. The English teacher, who was the house mom or overseer of one of the fraternities on campus. It was mostly football players. She said, "Are there any football players in this class?" I raised my hand, and she said, for the rest of the class, look at these guys that raise their hands. The highest they'll probably get is a C plus because they're football players, and uh,
Wow.
and my grades were better than it suggested, but I think that was maybe I got a B, but I think I got a C plus. I think that's my only C in college or in law school. So that's um, but yeah, I did well academically, and I think one of the things and I did a lot of other stuff. I was an RA and head resident, and I was president of mortarboard and things my junior year. But I think, one of the things what's the adage about idle hands or whatever? I think being busy and stuff, I think it just kind of, you had to focus on things. And also, we were on quarters back then, and so we had 3 classes a quarter. And so I think the classroom time was a total of like 9 hours a week or some, whatever class time was. Um, and so, there just wasn't a lot of classroom time. But yeah, I just really liked the classes I took and thrived while I was there.
Well, I think, two things. One, quarters versus semesters. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a lot of work because you're on a quarter, you only have 3 classes, but you have, half the time to, learn the material and then move on. So for the young people who are listening, don't use your semester as an excuse for why you can't do as much as Dan did, because at the end of the day, it does equal out. But the saying that I always fall back on is that work expands to the time allotted to it. Like, so
Yeah.
if you got a project and you say you got 3 weeks to get it done, amazingly, like on the 21st day, you're like hustling to finish it. If you had given it 14 days, you know, you would have gotten it done in 14 days. So you did all these things. You played 2 sports. You're training probably in the wintertime in between. You are an RA. One of my sons is an RA. It's a time commitment. You were
Yeah.
head resident. You were on the mortar board. How did you find the ability to succeed academically doing all those things?
It's a good question, and I really struggle right now with this whole kind of system we're in now with nil and portal transfers, and the concept of student athlete and junior college doesn't count, and all these other things because I was at a school. Again, Division 3 doesn't give athletic scholarships, unlike Division 2 and Division 1. That's the main difference in the levels. It was a discipline thing, and one of the things that was part of it, my parents were giving me a little bit of money, what they could afford, but I was working, summer times and all those jobs on campus and doing other stuff. First couple of years, I was a gym manager. A couple nights a week and on weekends, on Sundays during the football season. And so I could see that even then, like the that I was going to make a commitment to do as well as I could because I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I didn't want to kind of waste my money and time. And I think again, like you said, the amount of work, is in the time when you play football or any sport, or you're in theater or music or any other extracurricular. The amount of time committed to it is pretty substantial, and so you have to make sure that you're disciplined that when you get back from the dinner at 7 o'clock at night, that you spend those couple of hours getting ready for test or doing your homework so that you're not falling behind. And again, it's hard, I think, especially for knucklehead boys. My kids are 25 and 28 now. My oldest, his first semester was not a great one. Adjusting to living alone, adjusting to you got no controls, nobody asking you what time you're coming home. Are you sober? Are you looking for interest and all that stuff? So, but that's I just tried to really buckle down, and then I early in my college career, spring of my sophomore year, I met the person who became my wife and has been my wife for 39 years now. 39, 36, 36. And that helped as well because, again, I had kind of a set, I wasn't out trying to find, someone to be with or all that other stuff. And she was a great student. She was probably more of a natural student than me. When I met her, we were taking Hitler and Stalin together. It was a class that two professors in history were teaching. And the one professor, I think they're both passed away now, but the one was his first year there. And he told me for years afterwards, he said, Daniel Roy's a smart student, but your wife is much smarter than you. And that's true. But she's a good role model because, although she had the ability, I don't know when she studied because she was in a sorority and she would go out partying during the football season and stuff while I was kind of a cloistered monk.
Yeah, no, I think from my personal experience, I wrestled in high school and I didn't understand it or even think about it at the time, but like the second quarter and the third quarter, which kind of covers the wrestling season in high school, were always my best, GPAs. And I think it's because you've got a limited amount of time, you got to get that homework done, study for that test, and you're like, okay, I don't have any other time to do it. I got to get it done right now. And you're task oriented because you have time constraints.
Exactly. I think that's right. I think I experienced the same thing in college and in high school is when I had football. Those were my best semesters or quarters for the same reason. Yeah, like you said, you can't, and then when the spring came in high school, we would just kind of do whatever, right? Because, it just had more time. There was no commitments. And so, like you said before, sometimes I'd have a paper due or, hey, you got to read the 20 pages of Julius Caesar, and, be like, I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it on the bus. That's like, you know, when you're busy, it just makes it more crucial that you get it done because like you said, you don't have time to kind of put it off.
So before I forget, I want to put a pin in this. You said the lowest grade that you got at Monmouth was in English your freshman year. It might have been a C plus. And for the people who are listening to this, especially the young people, this is an awesome lesson right there because Dan, you got a C plus. That was your lowest grade in college, and yet now you are a published author. So I think that says a lot about how you shouldn't put limits on yourself arbitrarily.
I agree. I agree. It's yeah, and it just shows that nobody's there's very little perfection, and we always can strive to be better, and you know, and and so the my I think in high school I think I got a D plus for one quarter in physics, and again, I'm not sure why that was, but probably a lot of reasons for that, and yeah, you learn from that, and like you said, it's you shouldn't limit yourself. And you shouldn't get down. My very good friend from Monmouth as well. He became an engineer. He worked for Maytag for many years. He went south when they moved, and he had to take. I think he took calculus or one of the pre engineering classes two or three times because you had to have a C plus or better, and I think he got a C or something once or twice. And he's one of the smartest guys I know. I mean, and he had a fantastic career. I mean, designing stuff for Maytag for a 35-year career before he retired.
Yeah, I think grades are important, understandably. I mean, the lesson here isn't that, you should blow off your grades. I think the thing that I try to emphasize to my kids and to other kids is grades are a measure of, of something, but it's the hard work that you put in and what you learn from the work and the content that really matters. So, you've got your friend who's an engineer or your older son, all right, the grades are fine, but it's the hard work that went into it that's going to matter the rest of your life. It's like you're not going to look at a problem, whether it's a legal brief or some building something and say, oh, I got an A in evidence, so judge, I got an A in evidence. This is admissible. It doesn't work
Right.
like that.
No, no, and some of the great plaintiffs lawyers in our town throughout history, they'll tell you that, some of them that you and I both know very well, they will tell you the same thing. Like they were not the best law students. They went through it and did it, and they're some of the most amazing trial people and most successful people. So yeah, it's not all about the grades, like you said. And with my kids, that was always the case. My dad, that was always the case. He would always ask, oh, you didn't get past this, or you didn't do this, or whatever. But did you work hard enough, right? Did you work as hard as you can? That's the part of the life learning, I think, and tools that we get is persevering and working hard. And sometimes you don't get a trophy for it, but you get a life experience arrow in your quiver.
And the hard work that you do, it creates muscle memory, and you don't lose that, in my opinion. And I think you are an example of that because you graduated from Monmouth, you worked full time as an accountant for a number of years. Is that right?
I did.
And then you started law school, I think in 91.
That's correct. So yeah, I worked for about 2.5 years before I started law school.
But when you went to law school, you were working full time.
That's correct. Yeah, yeah. For the full time, I was at CNA Financial the whole 4 years I was at John Marshall, and I started in January of '91. I was in accounting, and had a after class on Saturday had to run over to the Big Red on South Wabash, a couple blocks away, to do some accounting work and get some stuff done for year end because it was January of '91, and uh, the best. Our first class in contracts was the night that was the first Gulf War, and our professor sent us home. Said, kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. He said, that the law will be here, but this is like a life kind of event, so you should go home and take a look at what's happening in the world. It's important, but yeah, and yeah. So I worked full time, and again, the time we've spent talking about Monmouth and the various activities, it set me up very well for that because, again, working full time, I was married and trying to sort all that time, and even going to school at night. It was three classes, so 3 days a week of 3 hours each, and trying to get the homework done, trying to work. In the 4 years I was at CNA Financial while I was in law school, I got promoted 3 or 4 times, I think, every year. I got a promotion and became a paralegal my last year, October of the third year. And I got a promotion in the law department as well as a paralegal. So working hard. And again, it was more, didn't have time to squirt around, right? I get to work, I'd do what I had to do. 5 o'clock, run over to John Marshall, go to the library, brief some cases, go to class, get home, go to dinner with my wife at on Thursdays or when we're done with class, and rinse and repeat.
So you went to law school part-time, you were working full-time the whole time. And so I'm gonna assume that you just barely passed. You just barely made it out of John Marshall. Is that right?
Yeah, not quite. I was fortunate to graduate number one in my class out of 100 and some students, mostly 3 year full-time students that started and made up the lag in '92 because we were doing less classes. One of my night students, she finished number two in the class, and at one point in the summer or spring, she asked me, she said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, sure. She said, I'm number two in class. Are you ahead of me? And I said yes. And then she tried to dissuade me from graduating in 4 years. She said, you gonna do anything this summer? I said, yeah, I'm taking six hours, and I did. So I was fortunate to graduate number one. And again, it was just like accounting. It was law to me was like a master's of liberal arts. It was just everything was new to me. Didn't know anybody that was in law, but we got packages ahead for reading, and this weird things on the top of the page any second, 421 any second, 305 or whatever. Like I have no idea what this alphabet is or what this language is, but I really loved it and was fortunate to do well.
No, well, I don't think that you were fortunate to do well. I think that you earned doing well, and I think that's the lesson that I take from it, and it's the lesson that I think a lot of young people, and not even just young people, all of us need to take from that is that at the end of the day, all the things that you did in my assessment when I hear what you're talking about, all the things that you did at Monmouth, built up the skills and the muscle memory to be able to multitask and do multiple things well. And so when you got into the real world, you were able to have that full-time job and then also tackle law school at the same time. And once you finished law school, you moved on to a law practice. I think the first place that you landed was in big law at Lord Bissell and Brooke.
It was, which is now for those that the young attorneys, it's now Troutman, Pepper. I don't know what the next word is. If it's Locke or it's changed a number of times. They've had a number of mergers over the years. Now I think still one of the biggest firms. The funny thing is when I started there in 1995, I think the total attorneys nationwide was like 140 or something like that. I mean, it was just not that big, but they were the third or fifth largest firm in Chicago according to Cranes back then, and I think that tells you and I've been around a while, kind of the explosion of big law. I mean, it's been fascinating to watch how 100 something attorney firm now is considered somewhere in the mid-size. It's probably uh, AM 300, AM 500 maybe, but some of these top 50 firms are 3,000 attorneys or whatever they are.
Yeah, it is amazing to see how the business of law has changed over the last 3 decades. When you were at Lord Bisson-Brook, were you a colleague of Steve Showalf?
I was, and we're still good friends, and he I think he joined in '95. I was because I graduated in December. I was like my own class, so uh, I sometimes the class of '94 adopted me, but the class of '95 also adopted me, and he was '95, I think. Um, he's very interesting because I think a year or two in at Lord Bissell, he decided to move to Bulgaria and teach law. Do you know that story? Yeah.
I do know the story. I know Steve because he and I graduated from Hoffman Estates High School together in 1987. So
Uh,
we're
I
we're,
didn't
we're
know
hi-
that.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
We went to high school together. We were part of the same. I think the gifted program. So we had small classes and so Steve, if you're listening, I want you to be on the show in the near future because you have interesting stories and an interesting life.
he does, and now he's down in Austin, Texas, with his wife, and
Yeah.
he's mediating and arbitrating full time, and it's become a very successful practice. But yeah, great lawyer, great person, and yeah, all of them, and I'll follow up with him as well. Tell him he should reach out to you and get on the show.
Yeah, please do that. So when you got to Lord Bissell Brook, did you choose what area you wanted to be in? Did they pick it for you? Tell me about that.
Sure. So one of the interesting stories on that is that again, I was number one in my class, but because I was in house and didn't have any law firm experience, I was having a real hard time finding legal work. And do you know my friend Guy Maris?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, he does workers' comp. But anyway, he was a member of Union League Club and was on the insurance committee there. He became president of Union League Club a few years after we graduated. But he was talking to a couple of people from Lord Bissell. He said, you should meet this guy. He's at CNA. He's been in insurance already his career. And so I interviewed with these two partners, and they said, hey, we like you, but there's no openings because we just made offers to our past summer class. Well, it turned out one of the people was going to do a judicial clerkship or whatever. And so the Tuesday or Wednesday before Thanksgiving of my final year of law school, Cassidy Shotty and Gloria made me an offer, and then Lord Bissell did, and they had like this long back then a long questionnaire about what interests you have. And no internet is it's hard for young people to believe, but there was no real good sources of information. You could look at Martindale Hubble, but it really wasn't good. So I was just kind of randomly like, I don't know what this stuff means, do I want to do? And so I ended up in this little small group of a bunch of mentees of a guy who was a very instrumental person in writing the GL policies back in the 50s and stuff. And so I went in this group, professional liability reinsurance and other, and I forget what the acronym was, it was fantastic because my boss is someone that I'm still friends with. He's retired now, but he's still a mentor and really taught me how to practice law. And and one of the things that was great is, again, because I had had the experience of being an accountant and other things, people gave me a level of respect, I would say, as a first year associate that maybe a lot of the other young attorneys weren't getting. And one of the great fortuitous things that happened was the day that I found out I passed the bar exam, one of the senior associates come in and said, "Hey, a-hole, did you pass the bar?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, tomorrow you're going to take a deposition of an accountant, an expert witness in a case. He's got to go in to get triple bypass the week after or whatever." And so we went down to the south side, and I interviewed this guy and deposed him, and that then now I had a deposition under my belt as a first day attorney, and so I got to do a lot of other stuff. And but no, I didn't really get to pick it, and but it was a great opportunity. It really was.
So the reason I asked you if you got to pick it is because I want to dig into the fact that you were put into a practice group and you did it. And how has that practice area that you were in informed the rest of your career in terms of like what you've been doing?
Yeah, so I started out as a litigator trial lawyer. I really thought I wanted to be a prosecutor when I was in law school, but then life and other things happened. It really informed me. I did a lot of errors and omissions coverage for life insurance agents. I learned a lot about insurance policies. Even though I'd worked at CNA, I'd worked as an accountant primarily, so I didn't really know the policy side. And then I went in house, in late 1997. I went back to CNA Financial, and and that stuff is still, if you look at my practice, as you said, I'm business law, very very generic, but real focus in corporate transactional, corporate structuring, with two deep veins. One is insurance. I do a lot of cyber and privacy insurance, but other insurance as well, both for carriers and for policyholders as issues come up, to help them navigate through those things. And privacy and cyber, at Lord Bissell, my group, we were doing some stuff around Y2K in the early days of Y2K in 95 and 96. So we were writing papers, we were talking to clients about what they were doing. And so when I got to CNA Financial at the end of 96, I asked my boss the first day I was in, I said, "What are we doing about Y2K here?" And she called down to IT, and the next day somebody came up, and the law department said, "We need somebody that knows you know, a bit about this subject." And so I became Y2K general counsel, and I've been doing privacy for 30 years as well. So, but a lot of, the other thing probably that I learned at Lord Bissell was just dealing with all kinds of, client needs and clients kind of personalities. I think we all face that, and no matter what kind of law we practice. I was on a call earlier today with my mentee. She works for the public defender, and she was saying, "Oh, it's, I guess, every area of law, you have this client, kind of how you have to deal with different clients, whether it's payment or whatever it is. I learned a lot of things like that, and
So the thing that I wanted to point out about what you just said that I think is really important is when you were in college and then even in law school, I don't think that you thought, you know what? I've got this passion for insurance coverage. I got this passion for privacy work, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to find my career in that. Is that safe to say?
very safe to say. Yep,
Right. But I think that from what I know about you, you love what you're doing now. You love to practice in those areas. Is that fair to say?
it is true.
And so to me, what that says is that sometimes when you really become good at something, the joy comes from the success that you have in it and the expertise that you build in it. So sometimes don't look for that thing that you love to do, that's your passion, the old adage, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I get it, but I think that that's overblown.
I do too. And as we said before we got on the show, sometimes that adage will come true if you do what you're passionate about, you may never work a day in your life. If you're passionate about, earthworms, there may not be a job that translates into your passion about earthworms.
Absolutely. So then that takes me to this other point that I want to talk about from your career in life is you, in addition to, working in law firms in insurance and privacy law, you also have a very active professional aspect of your career in volunteering on a variety of different charitable organizations and in the bar association. So, what motivates that?
A couple of things. One is again, we talked about Lord Bristol and my mentor at CNA Financial when I was in accounting. I wanted to get to the law department. There was a great mentor there who brought me back in '96. I've been fortunate, my uh, to have such great mentors, and wish I had more. I wish in law school I had more guidance and things. Again, it was a different world, and so the bar stuff, what started was one of my friends from law school. She started to move up the ranks of the YLS at the Chicago bar, and I sent her a note saying, hey, if I can ever help, let me know. And she called and said, hey, I know you like to write, you like to do that stuff. Would you like to do some editing? And really had no designs on leadership of the Chicago bar or anything. But what I found was I loved meeting people that I probably won't meet but for bar stuff, and I loved the community aspect of it. I loved going to the domestic abuse shelter and working with kids to create cards for their moms for Mother's Day. I loved kind of the legal aid aspects of it. I loved that kind of community aspect of it. And the other stuff is just really, again, as we've been spending almost an hour now, kind of talking about my life, there are people like that coach, there are people like my eighth grade teacher that we didn't talk about that, told me that, I was as a quick as I was kind of a bully. I moved schools in sixth grade, and so to get in and be, I was kind of a horse's ass, and not a really nice kid in a lot of ways, and kind of a jerk. Um, and then it turned, and I don't even remember how it turned. I went from being the in crew to being the one that was being bullied. And I remember sitting down with her. It was her first year teaching, and she said, "Dan, a lot of these kids are going to have trouble. They're not, but you got to just stay focused." Um, but that's the real reason. I do a lot of moot court stuff. I do a lot of mentoring of law students. I do a lot with my alma mater. And again, it's really just I've been fortunate in life to have people that were very supportive of me, that gave me opportunities, that believed in me. It's as we talked about, you have four kids, I've got two. You know, the world is hard, and it's we're not get into politics, but it's a lot of depending on who you are. There's a lot of hurdles and missiles. Not to be figurative, but a lot of missiles coming at folks, and it's So, I get more than, I always tell people I get more than I give because just some of the reactions, like pro bono work I've done over my career. I remember one time years ago, a guy he lived in an apartment over in Jefferson Park, which is the kind of neighborhood I grew up in, or near me. It's near me still where I live now. And he had some disabilities, I think, but he was like a 7-year-old guy, and his apartment had converted to condos. And I met with him several times. I looked through all his paperwork. I said, did your lawyer explain this to you? He said, yeah, I get it. You know, really nothing to do, and I felt a bit horrible, right? This is a guy, he's got to move where he's been living for 50 years. And I'll never forget, he said, like, he said, you've helped more than most people have helped. And I said, what did I do? He said, you sat down, you always had time for me. You made me feel like I was the only most important thing in your life at the time, and you listened to me. And he said, nobody, my family doesn't listen, my friends don't listen. So there's a real kind of reward of doing those things. And the bar stuff and the other stuff that I do, I care about our profession. I care about kind of, again, the attacks on the profession. I care about some of the things. I want to commend you, by the way, for the programs and the speaking and writing you do. I think it's very important, the issues that you're raising with on a lot of levels, diversity of the bench and a lot of other things. So I just think it's important that we've been blessed in our lives, and so helping the profession and helping others, to me, is just something that feels good.
No, I commend you for all the work that you do. I was involved with the CBA early. That's where we first met. And I honestly, let it go for a long time. And I really, circled back to it in the last, I'd say, 8 or 9 years. So, we're 30 plus years into our career. And have really re-engaged with it and have really enjoyed that everything that it offers in terms of being able to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't connect with because they're not in my practice area. It's given me a great opportunity to basically fill in gaps that were there when I was a young lawyer that made me want to leave it. And now I look back and I say, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to be that guy that I wish was there for me when I was a young lawyer. So yeah, I do. I love it. I love being a part of the bar associations and serving. So there is, you and I, we have similarities. We're both lawyers. We're very active in the bar associations. Um, uh, you know, but one other thing that we have in common is, and I think it is, I would characterize it as one of my passions, and I won't speak for you, but lifting is something
Yeah,
we have in common, and it's a passion of mine. Would you characterize it that way for yourself?
it is. It's a passion, and it's also it's probably for both of us as well, like a form of therapy. It's get a lot of toxins out, and I'm glad you're back. I know you had some injuries, and we both had injuries. Like one of the lessons I think both of us probably have learned is that we're not 18 anymore, and so you have to kind of temper your expectations, or the and just close your eyes and pretend that you have the massive weights that you're deadlifting or whatever. But it is a passion, and it's I go through spells where injuries or other reasons you get out of it, and it's always something I want to come back to because it's something that for me is a passion, and it's something that again, it helps me kind of mentally and physically, my well-being.
And you have been able to do something with that passion that most of us don't. And earlier you talked about some of the reasons, the motivations that you have for all your public service work and your bar association work. And it's really to give back. And the goal of this podcast is, purpose, passion, and profession, and ways that different people find intersections between those two. And I think that you've actually found a way to create an intersection between your passion with lifting and one of your purposes of serving others. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So what you're talking about, I think, is lifting the lend a hand.
Yep.
And in 2002, when we were both young lawyers, I was starting to do powerlifting, and I said to Ruben Chapa and some other leadership, I said, I'm doing this
I
anyway.
remember Ruben.
Yeah, yeah, and he's after a long career at the Department of Labor, he's in private practice now, and haven't I have to check it in with him to see how that's going, the billable hour and stuff from being a government employee. But and so back then, there wasn't as much of this kind of marathon stuff. But I said, the idea would be that I would lift in a competition, and then I would get pledges for either by the pound or flat fees to give money to disadvantaged communities. Mentoring programs. Lawyers Lend a Hand is a program that's been around for many years in Chicago and now has its own tutoring program. Back then, it gave grants to other programs. And so I left it in 2002. Then I hurt my back in 2003 or something. I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. And then Karina Ayala Bermejo, who was
I also remember her.
yeah, she was the executive director and part of the CBA at the time. She put me in a kind of a line item for the budget, and I told my wife, I said, "What can I do?" But I've got to do this. And so for the next from 2002 until 2019, I lifted 13 or 14 times and raised money for lawyers lend a hand programs, and haven't done anything since 2019. Don't know that I ever will again, but you never know. It's I'm not lifting the heavy weights I was back then. I'm doing a lot more focused strength, but you never know. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, we need some money. What do you think?" I may do a bench only or do something that some token squats and deadlifts. I'm no longer doing crazy lifts in those weights.
Well, if you do jump back in it for like an isolated event, I will help you on the bench only.
Perfect. Sounds good. It's a deal.
Well, Dan, I really enjoyed the time that we spent this morning talking. There's a lot to learn from your life experience, and I appreciate that you took the time to share it with everybody. Yeah, so thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and it's great spending time with you, and always good. We should do it more often.